everybody, welcome back to my channel. This is Kathy at Attic Treasures, etc. And I think we can all relate to having a stash of various widths of paper scraps where you just, they're just offcuts maybe from the top of a 12 by 12 sheet of paper, or just some random offcuts that you don't want to throw away because heaven forbid we ever throw anything away. We need to use it, right? We need to use it in some way. So I know that in the past I have struggled with how to use these. So what I would like to do is to offer 10 different ways that we can use these scrap strips regardless of how wide they are. And unless the video gets to be too long, in which case it will be 5 ways that you can use these scrap strips, and I'll save the other 5 for the next video. So why don't we go ahead and get started. I'm going to set that aside. And the first idea that I have is to take a strip and emboss it and then punch images out of it. So I'm going to take this one here. It's just kind of a plain strip. It's just one-sided. So I'm going to use this Distress Emboss Dauber. Of course, you can use any kind of embossing medium that you have. Just going to cover it, and I'm going to use a few different shades of the embossed glaze. One of them is Broken China, and these are from the Distress line as well. So I'm just going to put a little bit on here. Okay, and because I don't really want to mix these up, I'm going to put them right back in the jar a little bit. And then the next one that I want to use is Vintage Photo. And then finally, I will use Tattered Rose. Okay, and then now I will just take this little strip, hold it with my tweezers, and emboss it with my embossing gun. Okay, so now that that's done, what I'm going to do is take my little butterfly punch, and I'm going to punch out a few butterflies. And I love the way they just sort of fly out of the punch. It just sort of makes me giggle. I'm easily amused. And we can get one more on the end here. Okay, so out of that little strip I ended up with 4 glazed butterflies, and what I like to do with these, of course you can do anything you want with them, but what I like to do is when I sew in a signature, I take some of the strings that are in the center and I glue the butterflies to the string, and it becomes a little dangle, a little surprise in the center of the journal. And I really like the way that looks whenever I've done that. Okay, so that's idea number 1, emboss and punch. And I'm just going to put these in my little stash. And it is a lot easier to take a whole strip and emboss it and then punch it out than it is to do it the other way around, where you punch out these tiny little things and then try to emboss each one separately. Okay, so the next idea is to make some paper ruffles, and this is not a new idea, but what I thought it would be good is, like, for beginners, if you've never done this before, or even if you have, to have all these ideas in one video so that you can go back and look at all the different ones. So I'm going to take my phone over to the sewing machine and set it up, and then we'll get started on idea number 2. So I'll be right back. Okay, so I've got my sewing machine set up, and what I would like to use here is this long strip. It's like newsprint. I have this gigantic pad of newsprint, and so I have this long strip, and I've got a couple of narrower strips that I can use on top. And like I said, this is not a new idea, and you can do it many different ways. But why don't I just go show you what I've got going here, and we'll get started. So I'm going to make my stitch kind of long, so I've got it set at 3.5. And I have this little tool. It makes it a little bit easier for me to make a ruffle, and it came with my Cricut. I don't know what it's called. So I'm just going to start my sewing machine, do a little back stitch, and then I can put one of these narrower strips on, leave the needle down, and then you can just fold it under like this. And now I'm going to go to a zigzag stitch. And when I come to the end of a ruffle, I can just turn it under with my little turner under thingy, whatever it's called. And then lift it up. One more. The ruffles don't have to all be even. Sometimes it's more interesting when they're not. So I've come to the end here. Now I'm going to put in this, just right underneath this fold. I'm going to insert this piece of paper, this little strip, right underneath the fold. And then continue on. Now this narrower paper that I'm using is a little bit thicker scrapbook paper, and so it makes it it's a little bit more challenging to fold it, but it, you know, obviously it can be done, but it works really well with thinner paper. It's a lot easier. So we can just continue going along, and you know, making our ruffles as wide or, you know, narrow as we want. We can even go off to the side if we want, so it's kind of crooked like that. And then I have this piece here that's just going to go right underneath. And then there's something else that you can do too that doesn't involve paper. I mean, not paper, I mean like this narrow strip. You can make a whole line of these ruffles, a whole strip, without adding any kind of paper strip. So I'm just going to use my straight stitch now. And you can see it's a lot easier to make the ruffles this way because it's thinner paper. You can make a big long strip of these, and I'm going to cut this one off here. Just going to tear it because I wanted to show you another option. So I'll just go to the end. I'll show you what this looks like. So you can see there's a lot of, you know, there's different colors in here of this strip with this center strip that's narrower. But if you don't want to do that, you can take scraps of ribbon like this, because don't we all have scraps of ribbon too? And you can lay the scrap of ribbon right on top of the seam line that you've already created. Now I'm going to go back to my zigzag stitch and just go right over the ribbon. Got another little strip right here. And we can just go over the top of the one. Here we go. And see how much of your stash that you can use up just by making paper ruffles. So now you can just store these in a little roll like that. And when you want to add some, you can add them to clusters or to the top of a page along the top or to an envelope. I'm sure you can think of many, many ways that you can use these on your pages in your junk journal and use up some stash. So that's a lot of fun. It can be used with, you know, any kind of paper. Book page looks really nice, colored paper, anything. And it's just a really great way to use up your scraps. So that's idea number 2, to make paper ruffles. So let's go back to my craft desk. Okay, so idea number 3 is what I call a strip of strips. And you can go into almost any thrift store and buy rolls of calculator tape like this. And I love to use these to make my strip of strips. And what I usually do is, you can make them any length that you want, but I like to make them about 9 inches tall, simply because that's the standard height or the most typical height of my pages. And so if I want to use one of these strips as a belly band, then I've got one all ready to go. So I'm just going to measure one off here at 9 inches, and then I'll show you what I do. Doesn't have to be perfectly straight. You can always trim it later. Okay, so I've got a little tray here of just some random scraps, and you can use glue stick or any kind of glue. I'm going to go ahead and use glue stick. Okay, and I'm just going to use a piece of wax paper to glue on. Start with my strip just by laying it down, and I'm going to use a glue stick. Sometimes I'll even just put it through my Xyron and then just get the whole thing glued all at once. And then I just start laying the strips down, and they can be different widths, different types of paper. It totally doesn't matter as long as it covers the width of the strip here. This is actually one of my favorite things to do, and I think I did a video on this a while back. But like I said, I just wanted to try to put all these ideas in one place. Now, I'm not going to leave them all hanging off totally like this, but I'm not going to cut them all straight either. This is something that is super simple to do, like if you're watching TV and you just want to be productive and do some crafting, especially, you know, if you're watching things like Dateline or, you know, something like that where you don't have to totally watch every second of it. I do like to try to get them somewhat straight. And don't worry about these gaps in here, because we'll fill those in. And again, the pieces don't have to match unless you have a particular reason for wanting them to kind of coordinate. But you know, whatever, it just doesn't matter. It's this is one of the things I love about making junk journals, because there are no rules. It's very liberating. Having been a quality engineer for most of my adult life and having to work in tolerances of 1/1000 of an inch or less, and having to follow very specific specifications, junk journaling is like a breath of fresh air to me. How about you? What do you like best about junk journaling? Leave me a note in the comments, because I do read all of the comments and I respond to all of them, and I really love to get other people's ideas and suggestions and input. I think it really helps me, and it makes my day, especially when people say nice things. Okay, so now I've got this whole strip covered. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of snip off some of these longer pieces. And I like to have uneven edges. I'll just set those aside. Okay, so this is what I have so far. Now I'm going to take some other strips and kind of just put, we don't need that hole, and then just put them in more random spaces. Okay, so I'm going to let the glue dry, and then I will show you what my next step in this process is. Okay, so I let the glue dry, and then I ran it through my sewing machine, adding some zigzag stitches and then some random stitches this way and that, for no other reason than I like the way it looks, and it kind of helps it stay together a little bit better. Right. I don't know why I said I make them at 9 inches, because that's what I did right here, because what I really need is 8.5. And the reason I would do it at 8.5 is to make a belly band. Now for this, I would if I were going to use it as a belly band, I would probably trim off some of the edges so that it doesn't take up the majority of the space on the paper. But what I'm going to do now is for idea number 4. Before I get into that though, one of the things that you can do with these is put them on master boards or make master boards out of these. So if you make a whole bunch, you can cut them even with the calculator tape and lay them side by side on a big sheet of paper like newsprint or book page or whatever, magazine, anything that you can use as a backing, paper bags even, and then use those to make a master board that you can then cut up and use in different ways. So that's another way to use these. I like to keep these underneath my craft mat and then pull them out whenever I want to do a cluster, and that is idea number 4, to tear these apart and make a cluster. So I have a circle here and a little fussy cut bird, and then I've got some thread scraps, I guess if you want to call them. I have a little jar next to my sewing machine that I put all my thread scraps in. So I'm going to cut this apart and make a cluster that I can use on a journal page. And I'm going to cut it right in between here. And then I'll just set this aside for another use later. So now I have my piece that I want to use as a cluster, and I'm going to take this circle here, obviously made from a scrap, and just ink up the edges. I'm using Vintage Photo. This is one of my favorite clusters to make, and I keep a little stash of them because they come in really handy. I'm going to glue this right onto my little strip here. I'm just going to use some art glitter glue and just have it kind of hanging off a little bit. And then I'm going to put some thread on here like that, and I'm just going to, you know, do a little bit of glue on here like that just to hold the thread in place. And I like to have it hanging off of the edges of the circle there. And then I'm going to glue my little bird on. Just like that. Okay, so I really love this. And then we need a word. And I'm gonna, what I did here is I made a bunch of words just by typing a bunch of them in columns on my computer, and I cut them out, or I printed them out onto like parchment paper. I really like the way that looks. And the word I've chosen here is sing. And we'll just add a word. And you can use like the Tim Holtz word, whatever you call them, stickers or whatever, and I do sometimes, but I also like just to use my own words. So that needs to come off. Okay, so there's idea number 4, taking your strip of strips and making a cute little cluster that you can, or a series of little clusters that you can add to junk journals, and they look so cute on a page. You can, especially when you put a little circle, you can use these as tuck spots, or you can glue them onto a pocket or a belly band or anything, but I just love the way this one came out, so this will be going on a journal pretty soon. Okay, so I'm going to set that aside, and we'll move on to idea number 5, and this one is called weaving. And what I've done is I've taken some 3x5 index cards and glued them onto some book page, and in this case I just used dictionary page, and I'm going to go ahead and sew around this once I get all the weaving on. So I just have a little tray of scraps here. I've just set them aside like that, and you can either start on the side or start on the top. It doesn't really matter. Most of this book page won't show. The only reason that I put the book page on first is in case there are gaps, then you have something behind it to, you know, keep from just showing the white paper. And I like to do it on index cards because there's lines on the back and it just becomes an instant journal card. So what I'm going to do is take my glue stick here and just go along the top like that. And I'm just going to lay some strips down. Make sure I'm still in frame here. There you go. Just going to lay some strips down. Again, it's just pretty random. I'll trim this part off in a little bit. I like to put them, you know, fairly close together. You can see that I have a lot here that have the holes in them because these are the tops of scrapbook paper. I made a bunch of journals for a special group of friends. I made envelope journals, and that's where a lot of these scraps have come from. It's from making those journals, and I'll put a link to the flip through where I did a flip through of a couple of them, and I'll do that at the end and also down in the description below. So I need something a little wider here. Let's go like that. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to, now that that's on there fairly securely, I'm going to turn it over and just trim, not all the way to the edge, but just enough so I have some room to work. Okay, and I am going to trim this one because I don't need this part here. And I can take these thin strips, and these will be part of idea number 9. So I'm going to set these aside. Now I can take the strips and I'm going to add some glue to one of the sides. And now I need kind of long strips here. And I'm going to weave. Where you go under, over, under. That's why you don't glue them all the way down, obviously. Over. Like that. And then try to get them somewhat straight. I think it's better to have like maybe glue, not instead of glue sticks, so you have a big wide strip at the top, maybe art glitter glue so it's not so wide. And then I'm just gonna attach it here at the end like that. Cut it off. And now I can use another strip, not that one because it's exactly the same. Or what's on the back? Oh, I can use the back part of it maybe. Okay, so I'm going to glue a little bit on the end here. And then do some more weaving. And you just alternate over, under, over, under. And that is covered enough. So now you can just turn it over and just glue all along that bottom edge. And the ones on top just glue down as well. Give that a second to dry. And you can flip it over and trim the ends. Trim off the excess. Like that. Then we have this really pretty woven card. So I'm going to let the glue dry and then I'm going to sew all the way around it and then round the corners. Now you can ink these up, you can stencil on them or whatever you want to do to finish it off. So I shall be right back. Okay, so I took it to my sewing machine and I sewed all around it and then I rounded the corners. So now I'm going to ink up the edges and I'm using picked, well, let's put the sponge on. I'm using picked raspberry because I'm going to put a pink butterfly on there and I want to kind of accentuate that pink color. You know, you can just do a whole bunch of these this way and then put them in your like in process stash to be finished later, maybe for specific journals. And I'm going to ink the edge of this as well. This is a Dollar Tree butterfly. I love getting their butterflies. I'm going to put that on the side. This is like a little mini masterboard. Get my butterfly in place. Oh, I love that already. And then I took some of, I'm going to take some of these Tim Holtz people. Don't they look like best friends? Let's see, there's a little spot here that I can take out. Little punch out. And put them here on the side. Three best friends right here. And then I am going to put a sentiment on there, and I'm going to use one of the Tim Holtz Ideology label stickers. And the one I have chosen is Remember This. Because this looks like something that, you know, three best friends hanging out. And I'm just going to glue it on. And just a way to remember our best buddies. Maybe they're in college. There. Now I've got a nicely finished journal card. And I really like that. So that is idea number 5, weaving. There we go. Get it in frame. Alrighty, so I'm going to go ahead and stop the video here. We have ideas 1 through 5, which included embossing and punching the butterflies, making some paper ruffles, doing a strip of strips and a cluster from that, and then this one where we did some weaving and made a journal card. So these are ideas 1 through 5, and I will continue in the next video with ideas 6 through 10. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you'll watch the next one too. Please give me a thumbs up if you liked it. I hope you did. And do consider subscribing if you haven't already. And leave me a note in the comments. Like I said, I answer all of my comments and I really appreciate it and just love reading them all. So again, thanks for watching. I'll see you in video part 2. And let the serendipity find you. Happy crafting, everybody. Bye-bye.